Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Welcome, friends. Come on in. Sit down. Have a place here. We're going to study the Bible together. We're going through the Psalms verse by verse, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week. This is your best Bible bistro on the internet, Daily Dose Radio, and we want you to join us today as we look at Psalm 137. We're going to look at this psalm all week long. We'll do verses 1 and 2 today, and we'll go all the way through to verse 9 at the end of the week. When we talk about Psalm 137, this is a very interesting psalm, and if you're looking at it, the first thing you can tell right away is you don't have a superscript, so it doesn't tell us anything about who may have written it or why it was written. It's not a song of ascents. It's not a hallelujah. It's just a psalm that we have here after the great Hallel that we did last week and the week before. St. Athanasius, he says that this is a narrative psalm. And the reason I bring that up is I think he's right, perhaps, that this is narrative. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the psalm and the way it's put together, it's almost like this is an ascent psalm, but it's not an ascent psalm in the way that we had the Book of Ascents, that travelogue going from the tents of Kedar until we get to the city of Jerusalem and we're walking up those steps. It's not like that, and it's not praise. This is really very much melancholy. The psalm is sad. There's a lot of prayer here about the enemy. We'll talk about that later on in the week. And we see them suffering so much, and they're trying to maintain their holiness, the people of God are. And so, as I say, this is a narrative, almost like an ascent psalm, because we're going from Babylon. He's remembering what happened there, and he's arriving in Jerusalem. In verses 5 and 6, he comes to see the outskirts of the city, and then he sees the destruction of the city, and then we have the curses in 7, 8, and 9. So it's like as if someone traveling with Nehemiah, someone traveling with Ezra, arrived at the city and wrote this psalm on the way. They were writing about their grief in Babylon. Then they got to Jerusalem and saw the destruction, and they wrote about their anger at the Edomites and the Babylonians. So just see it in that context, I think maybe helps us a little bit, and also explains, this idea of how we're to pray, when we're under attack, and how we're to pray when we've lost everything, and how we're to pray when we see the damage that the enemy has done. So let's just read today. We'll begin in verses 1 and 2 of Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yes, we wept, when we remembered Zion. On the willows in its midst, we hung up our harps. Now, that's not my translation. This week I'm reading a modified version of the World English Bible. It's an older translation, and I've modified it some myself. I like this translation, so I wanted to use it. There are a couple of things here. First of all, when we remembered Zion. So they're in Babylon, but we're talking about something that's being remembered by them. They're remembering Zion in Babylon. They sat down by the rivers. The rivers of Babylon are many. There's the Tigris and the Euphrates and the Ulai and the Chinbar, and there are many canals and so forth that run between those rivers to irrigate the landscape. And they didn't go down into the water. They didn't participate in the Babylonian activity. They just stopped and humbled themselves and wept, because they were no longer where the Lord was. They were no longer in that appointed city of Zion. It had been destroyed by the Babylonians. And their willows are there by those lush landscapes, that those waterways and watercourses. Their willows were where their harps were hung. And the harps are going to come in here in just a minute, because we're going to talk about singing songs. But they were weeping, so what good's a harp when you weep? There's no joy there, so they're going to hang the harps up, maybe to be used at a later time. Well, I hope you'll join me tomorrow. We'll do some more in verses 1 and 2, and then read 3 and 4 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.